Before there was Beyoncé, before there was Drake, before Taylor Swift and her world tours and her eras and her re-recordings, before all of it, there was a family from Gary, Indiana, who invented almost every template the modern pop superstar still runs on. Five brothers on a Motown stage in 1969. One sister who fired her father to take control of her own career. One genius who changed literally everything twice. Tonight, 12 records, 12 moments the modern music industry still hasn't recovered from. Number 12, The Jackson 5, I Want You Back, 1969. They were only supposed to be a novelty act. Five brothers from Gary, Indiana, the youngest 11 years old, singing pop music on the biggest label in Black America. Berry Gordy had serious doubts. He wasn't even at the audition. His assistant watched it on videotape later and had to convince him to take the meeting. Motown signed the Jackson 5 in March 1969. In October, they released I Want You Back. On January 31, 1970, it hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Then, ABC hit number 1. Then, The Love You Save hit number 1. Then, I'll Be There hit number 1. 4 consecutive debut singles, all of them number 1. No artist or group in the history of the Billboard Hot 100 had ever done that before. No one has done it since. The production behind I Want You Back is one of the most studied pieces of pop craft in history. The bass line alone, played by Wilton Felder of the Crusaders, is considered a masterclass in how to make a rhythm section feel simultaneously loose and precise. The song was originally written by The Corporation, Motown's in-house songwriting team, for Gladys Knight and the Pips, who turned it down. So Berry Gordy handed it to five brothers from Indiana, put 11-year-old Michael Jackson on lead vocals, and watched it define a decade. But here is the detail most people miss. From the very first recording session, it was clear that Michael Jackson was not simply a talented child. He was something categorically different, capable of interpreting adult emotional content with a specificity and control that professional adult singers found unsettling. He wasn't mimicking, he was feeling it. At 11 years old, in the first take, on a song that had been rejected by one of Motown's most established acts, the modern pop superstar was already in that room. Number 11, Michael Jackson, Ben, 1972. The song Ben was written for a horror film, specifically for a 1972 sequel to a 1971 horror film called Willard, about a socially isolated young man who befriends rats. Ben is the name of the head rat.
Found what we were looking for.
The sequel follows Ben the rat after Willard's death. Don Black wrote the lyrics, Walter Scharf wrote the melody, and the producer of the film needed a performer for the title song who could make a ballad about a rat feel like a love song. Somehow, it worked. The reason it worked was Michael Jackson. Ben was released as a single in 1972 when Michael was 13 years old. It hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on October 14, 1972, and stayed there for a week. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Michael performed it at the Oscars ceremony the following year, and the image of a 13-year-old black child singing a ballad about friendship and isolation on the most prestigious stage in American entertainment, with a vocal performance that reduced grown adults in the audience to tears, permanently repositioned what a child star in pop music could be. Before Ben, child stars were novelty acts. They could be charming, they could be precocious, they could be commercially successful in ways that adults found delightful without being genuinely moved. After Ben, the standard changed.
I used to say
A child performer was now expected to be capable of genuine emotional depth, of the kind of vulnerability and specificity that this 13-year-old had just demonstrated in front of the entire academy.
if you ever be
Michael Jackson later said in interviews that Ben was one of his favorite records he ever made, that it captured something honest about his own childhood sense of isolation and longing for connection. A song about a rat, nominated for an Oscar, performed at 13. The template for what a young pop star could mean was permanently altered by that single performance. Number 10. The Jackson 5, Dancing Machine, 1974. By 1974, the Jackson 5's commercial momentum on Motown had begun to plateau. The first 4 singles had been unprecedented. The subsequent run had been solid but not seismic. And then on March 25, 1974, at a taping of Soul Train, the defining black music television program of the era, Michael Jackson introduced the robot dance to a national television audience. Not just introduced, detonated. Dancing Machine had been released earlier that year and was climbing the R&B charts. But it wasn't until that Soul Train performance where Michael, at 15 years old, suddenly locked his joints, froze his face into a mechanical expression, and began moving his body with the precise, inhuman articulation of an actual machine, that the record became a phenomenon. The footage was replayed, discussed, and imitated across the country. Dancing Machine hit number 1 on the R&B chart and number 5 on the Hot 100. It became the Jackson 5's biggest hit in 2 years. Here is what that moment invented. Before Dancing Machine, pop performance was about energy and emotion, about projecting feeling outward toward an audience. What Michael Jackson introduced on Soul Train in 1974 was the concept of the pop performer as a visual concept, as something that could stop a room through pure physical specificity rather than emotional warmth. The robot was not warm, it was precise, it was strange, it was completely new. And every subsequent pop performer who has used a signature move, from Janet Jackson's military precision to Beyoncé's controlled isolations, to every choreographed music video moment since, traces a lineage directly back to a 15-year-old on a television stage in 1974, doing something nobody had seen before.
Music stops now. Yeah.
If you're locked into this one, most people scrolling past these songs have no idea what it took to make them. We digs that history back up, one record at a time. The subscribe button costs nothing, and it means you won't miss the next one.
Number 9. Michael Jackson, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, 1979. By 1979, Michael Jackson had been a professional performer for 11 years. He had been a Motown artist, then an epic artist, then a successful solo act and group member simultaneously. He was 20 years old, and for the first time in his professional career, he was about to produce a record himself. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough was not produced by Quincy Jones. It was not produced by Berry Gordy or any of the Motown Machine or Epic's A&R team. It was produced by Michael Jackson, with his brother Jackie assisting. He wrote it, he arranged it. He sang the lead vocal and all the backing vocals himself. He conducted the orchestra. The song opens with a spoken word introduction, Michael's own voice, talking to himself about the power of love, that he included over the objections of people who thought it was too strange for a pop single. The record hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on October 13, 1979. It won the Grammy Award for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance. For an Epic Records debut single, it was a commercial statement of extraordinary confidence and success. But the larger significance of "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough" is what it established in the culture. The idea that a pop artist could also be their own producer, that the performer and the craftsperson making the record could be the same person, that the artist did not need to be handed material by a label, they could generate it from within. Michael Jackson was 20 years old when he proved this point. The blueprint he laid down, the pop star as auteur, is one of the most imitated and least credited templates in contemporary music. Number 8. Michael Jackson, "Rock With You," 1979. Rod Temperton was a British musician and songwriter who had been playing keyboards in a German-based soul band called Heatwave when Quincy Jones heard him and immediately recognized something extraordinary. Jones asked Temperton to write songs for a new Michael Jackson album he was producing. Temperton showed up at the studio with dozens of songs, fully arranged and fully realized. According to multiple documented accounts, Temperton wrote the initial melody and concept for "Rock With You" in approximately 3 hours. He recorded a rough demo, played it for Jones and Jackson, and both of them knew immediately that it was the centerpiece of the album. The recording took significantly longer, building the lush, warm, perfectly controlled production that gives the song its specific texture, a floating quality that makes the listener feel physically suspended in the music. "Rock With You" hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on January 19, 1980, and stayed there for 4 weeks. It remains one of the most commercially successful pop ballads in history and is frequently cited by contemporary producers as one of the most perfectly constructed records ever made. Here is what it invented. "Rock With You" established the template for what would become the modern pop power ballad, a song built not around emotional excess or vocal gymnastics, but around atmosphere and restraint. The production creates an emotional environment. The vocal operates inside that environment with precise, almost conversational intimacy. Every subsequent pop ballad that has succeeded through controlled emotion rather than belted release, and there are hundreds of them, owes a structural debt to Rod Temperton's 3-hour melody and Quincy Jones's production and Michael Jackson's perfectly calibrated voice. That combination created a template the industry has been running on ever since. Number 7. Jermaine Jackson, "Let's Get Serious," 1980. In 1975, when the Jackson family made the commercially and creatively significant decision to leave Motown for Epic Records, Jermaine Jackson faced an impossible choice. He was married to Berry Gordy's daughter, Hazel. He stayed at Motown. His brothers went to Epic, and for the next 5 years, Jermaine's solo career at Motown produced respectable but not spectacular results, while his brothers, now calling themselves the Jacksons, were scoring their biggest hits as a group. Then, in 1980, Stevie Wonder did something unprecedented. He wrote and produced a complete song for Jermaine Jackson, an artist on a competing label, called "Let's Get Serious." Wonder was at Motown. Jermaine was at Motown. The song was a gift from one Motown legend to another, a direct statement that talent recognizes talent regardless of internal label politics. "Let's Get Serious" hit #9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and #1 on the R&B chart. It was Jermaine's biggest solo hit to date and temporarily closed the commercial gap between his career and his brothers. But the story behind the record is what makes it significant in the broader Jackson family narrative. Jermaine had made a decision based on personal loyalty, staying at Motown because of his marriage, that had cost him professionally. Stevie Wonder's intervention was an act of musical solidarity, a statement that the most gifted musician of a generation believed in Jermaine's voice enough to give him his best work. It is one of the most generous acts in the history of Motown, and it produced one of the most propulsive, irresistible pop records of 1980, a song that proved Jermaine Jackson, standing entirely on his own, could compete at the highest level. Number 6. Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, 1982. Here is what Billie Jean did that no other record had done before. On March 10, 1983, the day after Michael Jackson performed Billie Jean on the Motown 25 television special and debuted the Moonwalk to a global audience of 47 million people, MTV capitulated. The channel that had, by documented policy, refused to play videos by black artists, added Billie Jean to its rotation. The color barrier that MTV had maintained since its 1981 launch was broken by a single performance of a single record on a single night. The song itself is one of the most remarkable pop constructions in history. Michael Jackson wrote it alone. The bass line, a low, cycling, almost hypnotic figure played by Louis Johnson, was reportedly so specific in Jackson's head that he hummed the entire thing to Johnson in the studio and simply had Johnson play what he heard. The bass line from Billie Jean is now preserved in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a literal museum exhibit. The recording was mixed 24 times before Quincy Jones accepted a mix. Jones initially rejected the bass line as too prominent, arguing that it would overwhelm everything else. Michael Jackson insisted that it stayed exactly as it was. He was right. Billie Jean hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1983 and stayed there for 7 weeks. It spent 14 weeks at #1 on the R&B chart. The Thriller album, which it helped anchor commercially, has sold over 70 million copies worldwide, making it the best-selling album in history. The Moonwalk is the visual record. The song is the sonic argument. Together, they constitute the single most concentrated demonstration of what the modern pop superstar is capable of. The industry before Billie Jean was one thing. The industry after was another. Number 5. Michael Jackson, Beat It, 1982. Eddie Van Halen was sitting in his recording studio when the phone rang. The caller claimed to be Quincy Jones and said he had a project for Eddie. Van Halen thought it was a friend playing a prank. He agreed anyway, drove to the studio, heard Michael Jackson's track, and spent 2.5 hours performing and recording the guitar solo that appears in the final record. He charged nothing. He did it entirely for free because he liked the music, and because, as he told Rolling Stone later, I was a free session. The guitar solo Eddie Van Halen contributed to Beat It is approximately 30 seconds long. It is one of the most heard guitar performances in history. Hundreds of millions of people who will never listen to Van Halen have heard Eddie Van Halen play guitar because they heard Beat It. The record was made in 3 simultaneous studios, with Quincy Jones mixing in a 3rd studio, while Michael was recording vocals in a 2nd, and Eddie was playing guitar in a 1st. At one point during the sessions, the studio monitors overloaded and caught fire. The session continued. Beat It hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on April 30th, 1983, and stayed there for 3 weeks. It won the Grammy for Best Male Rock Vocal Performance, making Michael Jackson the first artist to win Grammys simultaneously in both the pop, R&B, and rock categories. What Beat It invented was the genre collapse model of modern pop. The idea that a black R&B artist could credibly integrate rock guitar, win rock Grammys, and expand rather than compromise his R&B audience in the process. Every subsequent crossover record, every artist who has deliberately reached across genre lines into rock or country or hip-hop, owes a structural and strategic debt to what Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones proved was possible with Beat It. Number 4. Michael Jackson, Thriller, 1982 / The full version of the Thriller music video runs 14 minutes and 3 seconds. It cost approximately $500,000 to make, roughly 10 times the budget of a standard music video of the era. It was directed by John Landis, the director of An American Werewolf in London and Animal House. It features professional horror makeup by Rick Baker, a narrated prologue by Vincent Price, and 30 zombie dancers who rehearsed for weeks before the cameras rolled. Before Thriller, music videos were promotional tools. They were filmed performances or conceptual clips or simple visual supplements to radio singles. No one had made anything that was simultaneously a pop song, a horror film, a choreographed dance sequence, and a commercial for an album. No one had thought to. The conventional wisdom of the music industry in 1983 was that a music video longer than 5 minutes would not be broadcast, would not reach audiences, and would not function as a commercial tool. Michael Jackson and director John Landis made a 14-minute video anyway. MTV premiered it at midnight on December 2, 1983. The channel received so many requests to rebroadcast it that it became the first music video in history to be commercially released on home video, a separate commercial product from the single or the album. It sold over 100,000 copies in its first few days. Making Michael Jackson's Thriller, a documentary about the making of the video, was also commercially released and became one of the best-selling home video releases of the decade. The template Thriller established, the music video as a standalone cinematic artwork with a narrative, production value, and commercial life independent of the record it promotes, is the template every subsequent major pop star has operated within. The visual album format that Beyoncé pioneered 4 decades later traces its lineage directly back to 14 minutes and 3 seconds shot on a backlot in Los Angeles in 1983. Number 3. Janet Jackson, Nasty, 1986. Before Nasty, Janet Jackson had released 2 albums that virtually nobody remembered. She had been managed by her father, Joe Jackson, the same domineering, controlling figure who had managed the Jackson 5 through its entire Motown run. She had been directed. She had been told what to sing, what to wear, and what image to present. She had been, in the most literal sense, managed as a product rather than developed as an artist. Before recording the album Control, Janet Jackson fired Joe Jackson as her manager. She was 19 years old. She moved to Minneapolis, holed up in Flight Time Studios with producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis for months, and told them she wanted to make music that was authentically, specifically, and defiantly hers. Joe Jackson had warned Jam and Lewis not to make his daughter sound like Prince. Janet Jackson sided with the producers. Nasty, the second single from Control, released in April 1986, is a song about a young woman walking down the street, being harassed by men, and refusing to tolerate it. It is autobiographical, direct, and completely new in its emotional register for a pop record by a young black woman in the mid-1980s. The track reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. The album Control went on to sell 14 million copies worldwide, and win Jam and Lewis a Grammy for Producer of the Year. What Janet Jackson invented with Control, and specifically with Nasty, was the model for what would become the dominant mode of female pop stardom for the next 4 decades. The artist who makes her music explicitly about her own experience of autonomy, who fires the controlling figure in her life to do it, and who transforms that act of self-determination into art. Every subsequent female pop star who has publicly claimed creative control and positioned that claim as part of her artistic identity is working within a framework that Janet Jackson built at 19 years old in a Minneapolis winter. Number 2. Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation, 1989. The way Rhythm Nation was born is one of the most specific origin stories in the history of popular music. Janet Jackson, Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis were in the studio in Minneapolis, working on what would become Rhythm Nation 1814, holed up for weeks, watching 2 television channels on the studio monitors, MTV and CNN. According to Jam's documented account in Billboard and Rolling Stone, they would flip between the 2 channels for hours while working on music. MTV showed music videos, CNN showed the news, war in Panama, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, political upheaval. The specific visual contrast, the glossy unreality of pop entertainment, placed immediately beside footage of genuine human crisis, became the conceptual foundation of the entire album. Rhythm Nation is what happens when a pop artist decides that the gap between those 2 screens is a subject worth singing about. Released as the lead single from Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814 in August 1989, Rhythm Nation hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. The album spawned 7 top 5 singles, an achievement no artist had managed since Michael Jackson's Thriller. The Rhythm Nation music video, a military precision choreography performed by an army of dancers in matching black uniforms, became one of the most imitated visual concepts in pop history. What Rhythm Nation invented was the social consciousness concept album as mainstream commercial pop product. The idea that an artist at the peak of their commercial powers could use that platform to make a record explicitly about racism, poverty, and inequality, not as a fringe political statement, but as a commercial chart topper that teenagers bought in shopping malls, was new. The album that followed Rhythm Nation was not a departure from pop. It was pop, reloaded with purpose. Every subsequent socially conscious pop album owes a structural debt to what Janet Jackson built in Minneapolis while watching CNN. Number 1, Michael Jackson, Black or White, 1991.
Okay.
The Black or White music video premiered simultaneously in 27 countries on November 14, 1991. It aired at the same time on MTV, Fox, BET, and channels across Europe, Asia, and Australia. The estimated global audience for that single broadcast was over 500 million people, the largest audience ever for a music video premiere, a record that has never been broken. It was the first music video in history to use morphing technology for a racial identity statement. John Landis's sequence of faces dissolving from one ethnicity to another was not a visual trick, but a deliberate artistic argument about the fluidity and artificiality of racial categories. The technology had never been used in a music video before. It has been used in virtually every major production since. Black or White hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1991 and stayed there for 7 weeks, matching Billie Jean's run at the top. It became the fastest number 1 debut in chart history at that point, entering the chart higher than any prior song had entered before. The Dangerous album it came from introduced the new jack swing production aesthetic of Teddy Riley to Michael Jackson's catalog. A deliberate forward movement into contemporary hip-hop adjacent sound that proved Jackson was capable of reinventing himself for a new decade. He was 32 years old. He had been a professional performer for 22 years, and he was still doing things first before Beyoncé's visual albums, before the Netflix premiere event, before the coordinated global media moment. Michael Jackson premiered a music video in 27 countries simultaneously to 500 million people in 1991. The modern pop superstar's relationship with global simultaneous entertainment events, the eventification of the pop moment, was invented on that specific night. The Jackson family, from Gary, Indiana, invented almost everything, and Michael Jackson spent 30 years inventing the rest of it.